Hello and welcome to the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. I'm Stu Hardy, joined by Argo's number one fan, Derek Brissett. Derek, the Grey Cup has returned to Toronto for the 19th time.
Rightful
How are
home.
you feeling?
I'm feeling great. It's great to crush the dreams of the I'm just glad that with the Winnipeg Blue Bomber fans can finally stop trying to say that that team is a dynasty. Five straight Grey Cup appearances. That's obviously an incredible accomplishment, but you lost the last three of them, guys. Like it's not a dynasty. It's quite frankly just disappointing. Um like the Argos have two more Grey Cups more recently than you do. So yeah, don't lose to the Argos. And claim to be a dynasty this often. Honestly, great game. I thought great game. Super tight first half. I think there was some wild decisions from the Blue Bombers coaching staff. I'm not sure I think like in a lot of physical sports like football, rugby, hockey, etc. I think a lot of times we glorify and like celebrate guys that try to play through injuries. I'm not sure you should have let Zach Collaros back in that game. Huge cut on his hand. His finger looked real bad. Obviously, stitches. Had to wear a glove just to be able to hold the football, and underthrew two interceptions. To an Argos defense that played amazing, and yet you allowed them to do that, and you have the best player in the league, Brady Oliveira, is your running back, and you like barely gave him the ball. Kind of bizarre. Super happy that the Argos D shut that down, though. Obviously, really good game plan from the Argos. Really happy about that. Also, shout out to Dejon Brissett, whose name is spelt differently but sounds exactly like mine. He had a touchdown and one most valuable Canadian. So, ultimately, it's great to see the Grey Cup return to its rightful home, and it's always fun to prove to the rest of Canada that Toronto is in fact the best place in the country.
All right, you are. Right. Well, enough about the oldest rugby club in Canada. Let's go back to Romania for the conclusion of Canada's European tour.
Yes,
Um,
definitely the second most fun game I watched this weekend.
mhm.
Actually, it's probably not even because I watched more than two sports events this weekend, but we don't have to get.
Yeah.
I should have just let that joke sit like that. It's bad podcasting on my part, but
Well, it's a good thing you're editing it so you can remove it if you want.
sometimes you just got to sit in your mistakes, Stu. You just got to own it. It's what
Fair enough, fair enough.
separates
Well,
the men from the boys in the podcasting world here. So
so yeah. So, you know what? I'll begin with credit where it's due. This was definitely a better performance than the performance against Chile,
yeah,
but the sentiment still rings true from last week. So Canada were the first team to score with a penalty try, um, and then they conceded a couple of kickable penalties, so Romania were able to get back into the game. Then Andrew Coe got a yellow card. Now, this was due to repeat infringements across the team. Um, but with him off the pitch, that gave Romania the chance to score two tries, which gave them an 18-10 lead. Then there was another penalty that Canada were able to score. So halftime, it's 18-13. So, much closer than it was the previous week. And then fell into some similar trappings because at the start of the half, Romania scored pretty much immediately, not as quickly as Chile did in their first half with Canada, but still soon after the whistle went. Um, and then Romania got a yellow card. And it felt a much tighter affair with Canada getting a converted try to take it to 25-20, but then Romania got a try. They missed their conversion. And then Sean Parry was able to get a try as well. We're getting to like 30-27. And then Romania get a 20-minute red card. But this is already after like the 55th minute. So, this is pretty much a red card for the entirety of the game. And then Canada concede a try despite having the man advantage. I don't know what it is about teams in red conceding tries when they have a man advantage from a red card, but this was the second worst performance of a team in red to do that this weekend.
Mhm.
And it's still not great.
Do you need a quick sidebar here to rant about Wales? I'll let you
Uh,
pick the floor if you want it.
while I appreciate that, I feel that it is probably something that should be reserved for my therapist, my psychotherapist, my mental hospital visit. I think it's too much to just go over on the podcast. But I'm not happy about the Saturday or Sunday performances from my teams in red. But we'll focus on this game for
Despite
now
your,
before my seasonal depression becomes clinical depression.
despite you cheer for a
And
couple blue teams. Still,
I guess that does make sense. That's
oh,
what that's why I should now support Leinster, Cardiff, um,
the arrows. Shout out the arrows.
the Arrows always. Anyway, so the final score was 35-27 to Romania. Romania now win the Cernavodă Cup, which is a new cup that has been made with the Embassy of Canada to Romania. It's to honor the tradition of Romanian-Canadian cooperation in the nuclear energy sector.
Sure,
So
sure. Yeah, that's sure.
the Cernavodă nuclear power plant, according to the press release on Rugby Canada, has had two Canadian CANDU reactors and has been very heart of the bilateral relationship. It's the biggest and most enduring project that Canada and Romania have ever undertaken together. So, that name is pretty appropriate, a good relationship between Romania and Canada. And it's appropriate because Canada's chances of making the next World Cup are pretty much nuked at this point.
Huh.
Um,
How long were you working on that one for?
I had that in the chamber. Um, and of course, we have a predictable post-match report from Kingsley Jones,
Oh,
who says,
I didn't read it again. You have to tell me.
I will tell you this now in its entirety, as shown in the press release on rugby.ca. It was a real tough test. It was what we expected. Proud of my players in terms of their application to a test match. A tough stadium, tough physicality, and I thought they did really well. We started well with our line of defense, but allowed Romania to get some momentum through the maul as the game went on. Our backs looked dangerous when we get quick ball, but at times we made an error, lost ball, missed pass. Lots of learning for us, of course, things we can do better to close out test matches. But I'd like to say congratulations to Romania, and we'll move forward, take the learnings, and look forward to next year's Rugby World Cup qualification. Well, that makes one of us. Um, but again,
Those quotes weren't as bad as last week. They weren't as bad as last
mm,
week. That's kind of standard Kingsley Jones fare there.
yeah.
Yeah, I kind of said
Uh,
last week. I honestly think he does this just for to be a little bit. I think he's trying to be a little bit of a lightning rod at this point. I've gone so far into this, I'm full conspiracy mode. I think he's attempting to be like the lightning rod for this team at this point. So that's kind of, I don't know. It's just standard quote stuff. Some stuff we've heard
yeah.
a lot before.
So, as usual, there are things that get posted by Rugby Canada. So something they posted on Twitter was a picture of a few of the players, including um, Andrew Coe, Brock Gallagher, and Peter Nelson saying, always building. Now we look ahead to Rugby World Cup qualification in 2025. And on our account, we retweeted saying, building on what exactly? one win in 7 games this year. 2 wins over the past 12
Yeah.
games. Um,
I mean, anybody that's ever worked like construction or seen construction in the beautiful city that we live in, just because you're
mhm.
building something doesn't mean you're building it properly.
Yeah.
Like it could
Or
be
quickly,
or quickly. It
or
could,
effectively,
yeah.
or within budget.
Sorry, this actually has nothing to do with Rugby Canada. We're just very
Yeah.
angry
Yeah.
about the constant ongoing
Yeah.
construction projects in our neighborhoods.
Yeah. So
Um,
that's it. I think this is the thing because that post obviously got a lot of engagement as well.
I mean,
But because this is the thing, and this is just like the nature of the beast. This is how professional sport works, as in if you want to make it to
yeah,
the World Cup in this example, you have to be able to beat teams. And you don't have to beat every team. With the qualification route that is currently in place for Canada, they have to get a win against at least one of 4 teams
yeah,
between the Pacific Nations Cup and the um, playoff between South America and the PNC. And then failing that, they then need to get probably 3, but at least 2 wins over anyone in the final qualification tournament.
yeah.
And they only have one this year. And it's against a team that then turned around and beat them to end out the year.
Yeah, I see that's kind of the thing though, is I feel like last week, as much as we kind of ended up theming the episode a little bit around like, the question of why should we care? I think last week there was a lot of from us and from the fans in general, there was a
Yeah.
lot of, despite saying why should we care, there was a lot of like, it felt like the tone was more frustration, right, with the loss to Chile, a poor performance, obviously the history of Rugby Canada versus Chile matchups, right, and obviously Chile being the team that eliminated Canada from the World Cup. Chile's kind of become a weird like benchmark, I think, for where Canada fans are kind of gauging where this team is at, and getting blown out by Chile. I think there's a lot of frustration from the fan base and stuff, which isn't which isn't apathy and not caring and stuff. That's you're frustrated because you do care. Um,
Yeah.
but that being said, I think this was the this was the apathy game.
Yeah.
I think this um, as you said, I think Canada objectively played better. The forwards, I think the forwards were really good. Especially after I kind of like ripped on them a lot last week. Penalty try, Rumball's try was off the back of a scrum. Perry adding another try from the forwards, right? So like it's like they were a lot better. Um, but I think like it's just it's just another game where we can talk about, errors and attacking strategy and things that happen, and it's just going to be us saying like the same things that we've been saying for the past 10 whatever 10, 20, 36 years of Kingsley, 7 years of Kingsley Jones's entire reign as the head coach.
Mm.
um but and it's just, I think that is, I think, where like, and that's kind of where I'm like, this is kind of, I think, the apathy game. It's a game that means nothing, even if you want to put a nuclear power plant cup on the line. It's a game that means nothing, right?
Yeah.
Quite frankly, I think Romania wasn't that good either, right? Like it wasn't even like a great game to watch. Um,
No.
and then, you're kind of seeing the same things that we complain about, you know, kicks to no one in particular, kicks at bad times,
Missed tackles.
missed tackles, an attack that's way too predictable. Um, Having a bench loaded with a bunch of guys that can get their first caps. And congrats to those guys on getting their first caps, but also like, because that's first caps are always cool, but also it's there's a slight frustration that's like, well, why, like you only gave them 2 minutes each, right? Like, which is also kind of frustrating. Couldn't capitalize on a huge red card. Um, but I think ultimately though, like you were talking about winning the game, and I think like I think like I don't really care that they lost this game. Like I said, I feel like this was definitely more of an apathy game than
Hmm.
last week was because it is Romania and it's just there's not a lot there as far as like a rivalry or anything, right? So I think like there was definitely apathy, but I think it's just like I think going into 2024, we had the announcement that Kingsley Jones was going to return as the head coach. And
Yeah.
obviously, even if people were upset, and as I was too, and I was like, well, I guess, like, I don't know, I'm going to hope in the early days of this, it's like, oh, I'm going to hope that, he's learning that, like, he'll maybe the tactics will get changed and all that. Um, or maybe like, Rugby Canada will like, make some changes or like, structurally or whatever they'll do. And they'll be, by the time we get to the Romania game at the end of the year, by the time we get to the end of November, or the calendar year switches over to 2025, we'll be able to like maybe look at the season or like the test windows and stuff that Canada's played this year, the test matches, and be like, well, at least it's like you can spot improvements here or here. And I think like watching this game is just kind of like I just don't think anything has happened in the whole
Hmm.
year. Like I don't think there's been changes in the way like Rugby Canada thinks at like at least as regarding the men's team, at least regarding the men's team, I should clarify. But like I don't think there's been changes in like the way that like Rugby Canada thinks as far as how to build this team, how to develop players, attacking strategies, defensive strategies, training practice. Um, it feels like we've lost more players that you would think would be eligible, but then it's also like, a guy like Ross Brody hasn't played all year, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, like, why are we? It feels like we're almost losing players at the same time as trying to cap some guys. Um, the I don't like if we were seeing like some positive change, some new ideas in like attack, um,
Yeah.
some like just general like execution, some better, a different what looks like a different game plan because it looks way too similar to what has been not winning key games in the past, right? Developing a different game plan and stuff. And I feel like I would be a lit like I could at least be like, okay, well, hey, like it's like this team's not going to get better overnight, right?
Yeah.
We know that, but it's like you still want to see like signs, I think, of improvement
Yeah, of course.
and like I just don't like watching this game. I'm like I just don't see where any of that is. Like
Hmm.
we're a year, like I guess I don't know, a year removed from last year, like I don't even know, a year removed from the last World Cup, where the World Cup's happening and Canada's playing random games against like the Netherlands or whoever they were playing last November. Uh,
Yeah, Spain
Spain,
and
Netherlands, and whatever. Um,
yeah,
but like
Spain and Brazil.
I was just like, we're a year removed from those games, and like I don't think this team is necessarily better. And it's not that like and I'm like, you obviously got to give some of the new caps time to like get acclimated to test rugby, but I like I don't think like it feels like nothing has happened to actually
Hmm.
improve the team. And like you said, they only got one win this year. I don't think this year should have necessarily been about wins and losses, but the fact that it feels like nothing has happened and they only got one win is
Yeah.
kind of like it just kind of leaves you like feeling a little like bleh about
Yeah.
this game ended. Um and I think too like even like you see with like that World Rugby election and stuff that happened this year, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
Rugby Canada's still, or this week, excuse me, but like Rugby Canada's still voting like the same way that they always have, and
Mm.
um, I'm just like, you know, they're siding with the tier one nations, the Englands of the world, right? And
Yeah.
it's like not again, not with the guys that look like they're trying to help develop tier two nations,
Hmm.
right? Which is, I think, again, a little unfortunate. But also, I think by voting that way too, I think it also shows that it's like they haven't really. I think it's another thing that just kind of shows is like nothing's really changed,
Yeah.
whatever. And I'm like, as of right now, like Kingsley Jones is re-signed until next year. He's still signed, right? Um,
Mm.
so like, I mean, I have, I'm gonna assume he's gonna be the coach next year. I have no reason to believe that he won't be, right? Because like they've had opportunities to not make him the coach, and they still
Yeah.
keep him the coach. He's doing something that Rugby Canada likes. Um, so like I just don't know. I don't know. It's just a very like I think there was a lot of frustration with losing to Chile
Yeah.
this week. But this is just kind of like the longer this game went, the less I feel like I cared about the result of the game. And it was just kind of like, yeah, like whatever happens in this game happens in this game. We're not going to play again until July. Hopefully, something happens between now and July that can at least feel like
Something's changing.
changes, changes or something's happening to push Canada in the right direction. Because this is just another like overall disappointing season, but
Yeah.
it's now disappointment that you expect,
Hmm.
right? So it's yeah, I don't know. It is what it is. It's um I don't know. We can talk I feel like we if you want to, like we can talk into more detail about the actual events of the game, but
No,
I also feel like it's just going to be circling back to like the same points
yeah,
that
the
we
same points we made
always
like
talk
last week
about
and stuff. Yeah,
last points we've been making the whole year. Like
I don't see the point of basically
relating
wasting
it.
our time and our listeners and viewers' time to basically just regurgitate what we were talking about last episode. I, I think this is like I was saying, there's been a lot of apathy since Kingsley Jones was rehired, and combined with the additional apathy of Rugby Canada not making a decision to terminate his contract following.
You know,
Um,
well, that's the thing though, right? You didn't even have to terminate his contract. You just like you just didn't his contract was done. Like you just didn't have to
yeah,
give
that's the thing as well. Is like, but I mean, even becoming the first Canadian head coach to fail to qualify for a World Cup, and the organization at
yeah.
the time, because I know now
I
it's
think
changed,
I
but
think
in
that's
the whole sense of this, the issues we have with the men's senior 15 team go far deeper than just the head coach. But
no,
again, I'm
they
just
are. No, they absolutely are far deeper than just the head coach. But
yeah.
I think that's what I was saying last week, right? Is
Yeah, and that's the point I'm making. I'm like, we're just going over the same points again, and
well, I meant
I don't think we're actually like
I
saying anything new at this point.
yeah. I meant when I said like I meant more of like you know, the problems with the men's team, I think, are bigger than just Kingsley Jones. But like I think that's the one thing I did like say last week that I think might be worth bringing back up in this context is that I think the best bit of coaching that Kingsley Jones has actually done is turn himself into the lightning rod for all problems for Rugby Canada are just fire Kingsley Jones right now.
Yeah,
And people aren't necessarily looking at players that maybe aren't performing to standard that you're used to seeing them perform, say with their MLR teams or something, right?
Yeah.
or also like to not necessarily look at the organization because it's like, you know what, like obviously, like yeah, Kingsley Jones might has to deal with some tough stuff for as a test coach, right? Like he's got a small staff, we know that, right? He's got to handle a few multiple responsibilities that maybe, a tier one coach may not have to because he can delegate because there's a staff for it. Um,
Hmm.
right? And that is something that we do need to recognize or whatever, and also, but like because of the way that this has gone, like yeah, the like we just spend time yelling about everybody just spends time yelling about Kingsley Jones or
Hmm.
whatever. But it's like I don't know, like do I think everything that's wrong with Rugby Canada would be solved if he wasn't the coach? No. Do I think he should be the coach? No. Both things
Yeah.
can be true. Um,
Yeah.
but Kingsley is genuinely, I think he's done a great job of making himself be the lightning rod for
Yeah.
he's just um I don't know. I hope that dude has some like thick skin and like never really looks at social media or anything. Just for his own like mental health, I guess. But um,
Yeah.
definitely the lightning rod that everybody directs all their anger and stuff towards. Um,
Mhm.
even though it isn't just him, but that also doesn't change the fact that I don't think he should be the coach anymore either, right? Like,
No.
I don't know.
It, yeah. No, I think,
Yeah,
I think, yeah, I think ever since the high performance review came out showing the issues with Rugby Canada,
there's a
is
lot.
that yeah, it's a lot, and it's been in place for decades, not years,
But also like,
decades. And as a result, it means that it's going to take a long time for Rugby Canada to
yeah,
get out of the hole that they're in.
I think
But at the same time, one of the ways to get out of the hole is maybe not have the same head coach that failed to qualify
I
for
think
the Rugby World Cup.
see,
But,
but
that's
I
just
think
me.
yeah, no, I think like, but I think part of that though is because when they did do that high performance review, right, a big thing that they highlighted was a lot of like the culture stuff,
Yeah.
the organization, and like whether you're pro sports or you're like any business or whatever, I like culture is driven from like the top down, right?
Yeah.
And on the men's side, that the top down is going to be the people that hired Kingsley Jones, and then Kingsley Jones gets to drive the culture of this team, right? And it's like
Yeah.
if there's like the glaring cultural issues that they pointed out that there is within the organization, like like I said, like I don't get how you can look at that and be like, well, we trust the same people that built the culture to adjust and change the culture, especially like I said too, like a lot of like new like some of the new hires and stuff were just like promotions from within Rugby Canada as well, right? Like there's not doesn't feel like there's a lot of like new faces
Yeah.
Rugby Canada with the exception of maybe like a few new players that have been capped. Um so I'm just like I don't know, like I'm hoping something
Mm.
changes between now and July to give me some
Yeah.
hope for this team. Um but right now it's very little, like,
Yeah.
and I just don't um it
Yeah.
feels like
Yeah.
yeah,
I guess it is just a case of we have to just grin and bear it through 2025. And, I'm
like
hoping that Canada do qualify for the World Cup, but I agree with you. I don't think Kingsley Jones should be,
but
even if they
that's
do qualify, they shouldn't Kingsley Jones shouldn't be the one to
not
take them there.
they're not going
Um,
though.
but
Well, I think
but
like
and but no, Derek, we need to move on from this. We need to look at other things that have been happening in Canadian rugby over the past week. And we're going to start. We've been talking about the men's 15s. Let's talk about women's 15s, specifically women's 15s player of the year, because World Rugby have announced their nominees for their different categories for the end of year awards. And only one Canadian has been nominated, and it is for the World Rugby Women's 15s Player of the Year, which is Alex Tessier. So, congratulations to Alex. There's only four nominees in each category. So, this
the
is a
other three.
huge honor for her to. get this. And we're unfortunately the public can't vote for the Player of the Year awards,
That's
but
probably the best, let's be honest.
it is probably for the best because what we'd set up like millions of bot accounts and just have them vote for Alex, and it would be fully deserved as well.
Who are the other three nominees?
Um, not Alex Tessier, not Alex Tessier, not Alex Tessier.
Oh
So,
yeah, they all stink.
for my opinion, I think that is great. But apparently, there's this woman called like Ellie Kildun. Um,
Oh my.
I haven't really heard of her, so she obviously isn't really that big. There's
Oh.
Alex Matthews from England as well, and Pauline Baudon Santos for France. So yeah, a good European contingent and the hopeful winner, Alex Tessier. So yeah, but you can find out all the nominees for all of the World Rugby Awards that are available on the World Rugby website. Now, let's bring it back to North America because we also had some news coming out of MLR because they have released their schedule for 2025. And unfortunately, there's no Canadian team, same as last year. So interest is minimal at best. But
No, it's like
uh,
hey.
there
Yeah.
is technically the unofficial Canada South team known as the New England Free Jacks.
Yeah.
They still have the most Canadians on their squad, so they'll be looking for the three-peat and mathematically should be able to get it this year.
Who
Um,
who do you think wins a game between the Free Jacks and the rest of Canada?
well, I'm guessing the Free Jacks don't have Kingsley Jones as a coach, so I'm gonna say the Free Jacks. Anyway, it looks as though there will be 16 games per team played over 17 weeks. There are different schedules. That's because the Western Conference will only have five teams for the 2025 season, and therefore it's uneven. I believe Utah um, have a bye in week one, which is not something
Never
that
mind.
anyone wants to have, but because of how it's all leveled out, that is the situation. There are apparently going to be some games played during the week, midweek games. Um, and you may have noticed on the US Rugby Players Association social media feeds that they have um, come out against this decision. Obviously, they were not informed prior to the schedule being released, and they're saying that it is rightfully not enough time between games, and bye weeks have also been reduced as a result. And despite all this, despite there being one fewer team than last year, the playoff format will remain the same. So the top four teams from the East and from the West will play each other in conference semifinals, then the conference final, and then the championship final. There's also been some news on relocations of certain teams. Now, not at Rugby ATL moving to LA kind of relocations, but basically different stadiums. So, uh, apropos, RFCLA are moving to Wallace Annenberg Stadium at UCLA. Now, Wallace Annenberg Stadium is mainly soccer, so it should have the majority of dimensions similar for rugby. The end zone may be narrower as a result because it is a soccer field, but we shall see when the 2025 season come around. But the big news that has come out is that San Diego is returning to Torero Stadium, and this has, been met with a lot of negativity from the fans. I think the big issue has been that Snapdragon Stadium, brand new stadium, state-of-the-art facilities as well. Um, but it also looks as though the MLR has been pushed out in favor of the MLS because the Snapdragon Stadium is going to become home of San Diego FC. And as such, there are provisos in place. I know this is something that also affects rugby teams that share football grounds or soccer grounds in the UK is that soccer competition takes priority. They have agreements in place that whichever location they play at, they have to have priority of the field. And also feeling that MLS will just bring in more money than MLR anyway. So,
Yeah, no
yeah,
kidding.
obviously we'll never know like the full names of the full details of any of these contracts and any of these decisions, but it does look like this is a cost-cutting measure um, for the Legion, and it's familiar ground, a 6,000 capacity. They'll be looking to sell out the stadium as much as possible. Any Legion fans who have already bought a season ticket believing that it was going to be at Snapdragon, let us know what the situation is in terms of um, seating when it comes to moving back to Torero. What's that procedure going to be like? Um, but yeah, this is not really going down well with the Legion fans.
Yeah, I guess that's something. Yeah, yeah. Snapdragon looked really cool, so I understand fans' disappointment and stuff. Um, I think like the schedule. I think obviously is interesting. I really, on the positive side, I really do like that the season's going to be over before the test window.
Mm.
I personally, I think in 2024, that personally, I thought that sucked. I thought it really killed the momentum of like the playoffs, like having to wait 3 weeks and stuff. Um,
Yeah,
and I think in some of the games that happened right after too, like because obviously, a lot of the Canadian and American players, and some of the South American players were, playing for their national teams, but there's also a lot of guys from like, the UK or New Zealand or Australia or something that obviously don't play for the national teams. And I feel like they just kind of
Mm.
ended, I don't know, sitting around a little bit. And I feel like you can maybe see that in some performances that happened. Um,
Mm.
but like, I mean, I know it was even for everybody, but it's still like, I don't know, it was just it's the worst time of the MLR season to decide to have a random 3 week break.
Yeah,
Um, and I'm glad to see that it's not going to happen again this year. Or at least I don't think it's going to happen based on the end of week 17 in the playoffs. The Yeah, the weekday games are weird. Um, those are super weird. I get the players being upset about that, but also like um it's like from a fan point of view, it's like it's weird to have a game on like a Tuesday night.
yeah.
Right? Unless it's like a holiday or something. Like I know like the Arrows played a Thursday night games before the like the May 2-4 weekend, right? So
Mm.
that's like, but I kind of understood that because it's like, okay, you're doing that before a holiday weekend. Like I get that one. Um,
Yeah.
but some of these just kind of feel like, oh, here, play on a Tuesday, play on a Wednesday, um, play on whatever day. Um, and so like those are kind of weird. I think they're weird just from a fan point of view. Obviously, as you mentioned, the players are upset about it. Or the Players Association is upset about it. I guess it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Like if anything actually comes from their complaint,
Mm.
or if we're just gonna have a few weird games in the season. I think one of the things that will make this year a little bit differently though is, if they do end up playing those a lot of those weekday games, like roster management and roster management and like just keeping your players healthy and like what teams are going to be able to stay healthy and deal with their, any moments of the schedule where they got to play, you know, on like, with only like 4 days rest or whatever, right? And like it'll be interesting to see how that, ends up like shaping the standings and stuff. See if
Mm.
some teams deal with it better than others or however that's going to happen. But beyond that, it'll be interesting to see if like the complaint from the PA goes anywhere. I don't know what you do at this point.
Yeah,
You schedule if
yeah,
they don't like it. Like, I don't know.
yeah. I don't know how much power the US RPA has in these kind of situations,
Well,
but
apparently not enough to see the schedule before it gets released.
yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah, I honestly have no idea. So like I don't know. We'll see if this like I don't know. I guess that would be a thing that I'd be interested to see happen. Like if they're able to do anything, or is this just going to end up being like the players are upset about it, but then the league does nothing, and the players just are upset but end up playing in the games anyways? Or
yeah,
because I mean, like last year, like we all know the MLR can redo a schedule. We learned
yeah.
that
Last
last
minute. Yeah,
right? So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if they happen. I hope though that if anything does, if in the event that anything does get redone, the season still ends. The shield is handed out before the July test window because that I think that should be a priority for the league to get that done before the July test window. So
yeah,
I hope that sticks with. I really like that they went back to that, and I think the playoff format. I know there's one less team. The playoff format right now, I think, is perfect, and they should never touch that either. Like
yeah,
that's until the league gets so big that only 8 teams making the playoffs doesn't feel like enough. Right?
yeah,
Like it's right now it's the perfect playoff format.
yeah. Yeah, so I guess we'll just have to keep our nose to the grindstone and see how MLR 2025 comes about.
Yeah.
But hopefully, with the concerns from the players, this will be the only year where we have midweek games and players get enough rest between the rounds so that they are able to, continue their rugby playing careers for as long as they wish. And now we move from MLR to our nation's capital into Ottawa because the University of Ottawa hosted the Canadian University Men's Rugby Championship. And, we last week were saying that, it's UBC's and UVic's tournament to lose, essentially.
And they did.
And they did. They lost it. So we begin with all the teams involved, which is ATS and the Piranhas. Then we have the Memorial Seahawks, UBCO Heat, the UBC Thunderbirds, the Queen's Gales, UVic Vikes, the Ottawa GGs, and the Guelph Griffins. Um, and, things seem to be going as predicted. ATS beat the Seahawks, and then UBC beat UBCO Heat. Only just.
Mm.
Final score UBCO nil, UBC 104. So, basically a draw at that point. Then came the first big shock of the tournament, which is that Queens beat Victoria 26-24. I saw this game, and I think what it boiled down to at the end was a miscommunication in how much time was left, because of the short turnaround period of this tournament between games, matches are only 60 minutes long, so halves are only 30 minutes. Um, so the Vikes are down by 2 points, and it gets to the 60-minute mark, and one of their players chips the ball ahead, trying to get advantage, and realize probably too late that it was a 60-minute game, not the standard 80-minute game. So Queens double check with the referee, they kick it into touch, and the Vikes are out of championship contention.
I feel like you should know the tournament format.
I think you should, but then I can understand it slipping if every other game you play is 40-minute halves, 80 minutes total.
You should maybe know.
Yeah, I think you
You
probably should. Well, that player is definitely going to remember going forward.
should probably know. I didn't see this game. I'm just
Yeah.
basing it off of what you just described to me, but you should. I feel like you should know that.
Yeah. And then the final game of the first round, the hosts
Mhm.
Ottawa against Guelph. This is a repeat of the Ontario final. But the fortunes went the other way. This time it was the Griffins that were on the winner's end. Final score, GG's 12, Griffins 42. So now we move on to the second round, which includes the semi-finals, the consolation semi-finals, followed by the championship semi-finals. Consolation semi-final, the UBCO Heat beat the Seahawks 20-17. And then we have Ottawa GG's 31 to UVic Vikes 35. Now we get on to the championship semi-finals, and we get the second upset of the tournament, where the ATS Piranhas, in their first visit to the tournament, beat the multiple winning champions UBC 22 to 21. And I tried to go back and rewatch this game, and annoyingly, it's not available on the Rugby Network at the time of recording, which is just such a pain because I desperately wanted to go over this and just see um how this all went down. But that is an absolutely phenomenal result. And someone pointed out that as much as they are a fan of the Thunderbirds, this marks a turning point and a step of improvement for teams outside of BC. That it is finally the case that these guys, it's not always going to go BC's way. It's not always going to be the Thunderbirds the um or the Vikes to get that victory. It's finally going to go to someone else. And so that someone else is either ATS or it was going to be Queens because the Gales beat the Griffins 38 to 28 in the other championship semi-final. So we have ATS versus Queens in the final. And then on the Sunday, the final day of the competition, we have the hosts open for the seventh place match, with Ottawa beating Memorial 33 to 17. In the fifth place match, we have the Vikes beating the Heat 59 to 7. And in the bronze medal match, we have the Griffins versus the Thunderbirds, with the Thunderbirds emerging victorious. The final score, UBC 47, Griffins 40. And then we get on to the main event, Queens versus ATS. And this was a great game. A lot of back and forth. ATS going into halftime with a narrow victory. Queens getting the first score to claim that victory back. ATS getting a penalty to make it 19 to 20, and then finally getting another penalty to make it only a try that can get Queens back into this game. ATS's defense throughout this tournament was phenomenal. This is how they were able to beat UBC, and they obviously had a much more decisive result against the Seahawks, who ultimately finished eighth in this competition. But it was the defense that held out. And finally, it was with the last pass of play, Queens were trying to make their way up the field. Unlike other teams, they weren't kicking the ball away. They actually knew when the clock went red. But the Piranhas were able to tackle the player into touch. The flag went up, um, and I believe it was actually a penalty just beforehand for the Piranhas. So they tapped, kicked out, and they became the first team outside of BC and the first team from Montreal to lift the Spence McTavish Cup and win the Canadian University Men's Rugby Championship. Now, this game you can watch on the Rugby Network, and I strongly recommend you do.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a great tournament all around, and I think, like you said, it was cool to see. Not that I'm cheering against UBC or UVic, but like, it is cool to see, some teams from other provinces, um, you know, kind of, make it to the final.
Yeah.
And it shows. I think ultimately, like I mean, I know like Queens and Guelph have been kind of powerhouses in Ontario for a long time, right?
Yeah.
And but like I think it's good. I think ultimately it's good for like just the university game in Canada and also just I guess rugby in Canada in general to have like, successful programs being built up like across the country, right?
Mm,
Because, I feel like, in the past it kind of seems like there's maybe a little bit of like, if you want to, play university rugby, you want to make sure you get a look for the national team and stuff, you maybe do have to go all the way out west, right?
mm,
But, having programs pop up in, like ETS, it's their first time in the tournament and they end up winning it, right? Like I think that's ultimately good because I think it'll provide like ultimately I think it's like when you're playing for a school and you're deciding what school to go to, like, what programs and things that the actual academic part of the school offers is going to
mm,
factor into your decision. And the more schools that have well-developed rugby programs and stuff just creates more options for different types of players, different types of people that want to play rugby. And, I think ultimately, I don't know. Just think it's a really good thing to see. Like I kind of mentioned, I haven't gotten to see as much of this tournament as I would really have liked over the course of the last week. I am looking forward to, rewatching, getting caught up on all the games, but I think like on a surface level, it's again, not that I'm cheering against UBC or UVic, but it's nice to
mm,
see, other programs kind of step up, a few upsets in the tournament, and ultimately, have a final between a team from Quebec and Ontario is really cool. And also
mm,
from a Quebec standpoint, where it's like on the men's side of the game, it kind of feels like a province that is I don't know if like I want to say like underserved is kind of the word, but they definitely feel like they're underrepresented on the national team, right?
mm.
And on the men's national team anyways, the women's national team is a lot of players from Quebec, but it's like so I mean, I don't know, like it's nice to see like, that province get a big win in a on a nationwide tournament as well.
Yeah. Um, well, the interesting thing as well is next tournament in 2025 will also be the first tournament since 2022 where the defending champions are also the hosts because it was announced earlier this year that ATS will be the host for the CUMRC for
That's also good too. I
2020.
think like I mean in building off of that, like Quebec, I think it like needs some bigger events to happen to maybe like grow the game in that region. So
Yeah.
I think having the university championship would be awesome. Like the national team, they were scheduled to play a game there before COVID hit, but
Mm,
COVID did hit, so they never played a game there, which ultimately means the Canadian men's national team still has not played a game in Quebec
yeah.
ever,
That's
which is wild considering it's
that
one of the biggest and most populated provinces in Canada.
Yeah, I hope that gets rectified soon
Yeah.
enough. But if you want to watch any of the 2024 or 2023 games from the CUMRC, you can do so on the Rugby Network, and you can also find the Premiership Women's Rugby available there as well. And if you want to catch any of the Tier 1 games that are taking place this weekend and the final round of the Autumn Nation Series, you can do so on DAZN. And if you like this episode, be sure to check out more episodes as well as our written pieces on our website, therougerugby.ca. You can also find our podcast on Spotify, S4P, and Apple Podcasts. We have a YouTube channel at The Rouge Rugby. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell notification to stay up to date with all our videos. We're also available across social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and now we are available on Blue Sky, all at The Rouge Rugby. Derek, where can people find you on social media?
At Percent the Jet across all social media networks. Not Blue Sky yet for a personal account. Because I'm gonna be honest, I still don't really know what that is. So I'm glad you're on top of the game though, and creating the Le Rouge Rugby Blue Sky account. But I'm not quite there yet.
And you can find me across social media at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. Well, that's where we're going to end this episode. Derek, thank you for joining me, and thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. We hope you can join us again next time.